Welcome to the Your Brain Shift podcast, where we explore topics that promote mindset shifts and brain shifts for greater success, health, wellness, and fulfillment. I'm Keith Engelhart, and I'm chatting today with Ian Bly. Ian is the director at Optimized Results Institute for Integral Enneagram Studies and a personal trainer for people's minds. Mostly we can think about personal trainers for our physiology. Ian focuses on people's minds. He's a communication specialist, and he's working to enhance the most powerful areas of people's lives, and that's communication. He says communication and interaction is the foundation for everything we do. I agree. Virtually every aspect of our lives at work or home is helped or hurt by our communication and how well we communicate. Every initiative that you want to launch, every meeting, every interview, every sale, conversation, and every relationship hinges on the quality of communication. Ian also shares that this can be enhanced quickly and effectively, understanding the motivations and drivers behind our communication styles. So welcome to the Your Brain Shift podcast, Ian. How did you get interested in communication and interaction and helping others enhance this fundamental part of human relationship and their lives?
It was kind of a twisty-turny thing back in college. I actually started out pre-law, as far from this as you could get, and got very disillusioned in the legal justice system very quickly and started thinking about, okay, what else am I interested in? And I sort of have two halves that I'm very interested in, one being science and physics and one being art. And so I started just, okay, liberal arts major at this point, why not, take both? So I took lots of science and lots of art classes. And as I was doing it, I started noticing the types of people who were in each school and noticed that there was a horrible communication gap between engineers and designers, and that they had to work together and they had to work well together, but they just couldn't stand each other and they couldn't talk to each other. And I thought, wow, what a great place for me to just jump in there and be a conduit. Mm-hmm. So I started focusing on the way that engineers communicate and the ways that artists communicate, which is all ripples flowing from the way they think.
Yeah. And the way they perceive. There's actually a biological bias there too, because most engineers rely on their left cerebral and the logic sequence, that kind of stuff, where anybody that's in artistic endeavors, they're going to be much more right cerebral. Exactly. And view things. It's just kind of like having four different people look at the video of an accident, or if they witnessed it, and get the perspective of what they saw. It's going to be completely different because these natural biases that we have, and then we make these bad assumptions that everybody communicates the way we do.
Absolutely. It's really funny too, because one of my favorite examples of the car accident is you can even just break it down to two people, one on either side of the street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one person sees the car swerve and thinks, what an idiot. Whereas the other person saw him avoid the puppy.
Right. Yeah.
And so completely different interpretations of the same visual scene.
Yeah. So I know you're into the Enneagram model and processes. So what nudged you down that path of study?
It's another twisty one because it's a love-hate relationship. Originally, I looked at what everybody was calling the Enneagram, which I found out was actually incredibly inaccurate because it's like saying the road. There are as many roads as there are destinations, and there are as many Enneagrams as there are things that shift their physical, or they shift their state.
Right.
From state to state, anything that shifts state. So there's an Enneagram of music, there's an Enneagram of water that moves through the triads of solid, liquid, and gas. So the states of precipitation, condensation, etc. So it has nothing, psychology came along 2,300 years later.
Yeah.
So what people called the Enneagram, which was completely psychologically based, initially turned me off, because it was saying, let's look at all the things that are wrong with you, Keith, because we need to fix you. This is wrong with you, and this is right. And it's like, whoa, what a lousy place to start. Yeah. So I went away from it and started looking into many, many other different things for years and years and years. And eventually got turned on to George Gurdjieff and Ouspensky's models of the Enneagram that they had taken back in 1897 or something like that from Tibet, which was the original Sufi model that was so much deeper. It's kind of like the difference between a Polaroid and a 70 millimeter film. It's that big a difference. And so now we had a system that was dynamic, that changed constantly, because every person is not one way. It's kind of like the Myers-Briggs or whatever. You're not this thing.
Yeah.
Now we can put you in a box and then we'll just deal with you as that thing.
Yeah.
Because you change all the time. So to have some kind of a dynamic model that says, well, depending on external circumstances, certain things are going to get triggered up, certain things are going to get suppressed, certain things are going to flare, blah, 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 blah. And if we understand where you're coming from, where your lenses are, we're going to be able to predict a lot of that resulting behavior, how you're going to respond to things. Easiest way of looking at it with lenses. It's one of my things for relationships. You'll like this, Keith. It's very difficult to see red flags when you're wearing rose-colored glasses. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what happens is you don't see red if you're wearing red glasses. Mm-hmm. And we have these lenses that completely block out certain things.
Yeah. And all our sensory input and things that we're observing and perceiving are filtered through, belief systems, all kinds of stuff. It gets contextual and state driven, even if it might be the same context as the day before. If, what's going on with me internally, my energy is drained, I'm in a bad mood, I'm in a good mood, or whatever, all that, changes our perception, and what we perceive triggers our interactions and behavior, communications, all kinds of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that integral nature of it is what drove me into this, was that concept of everything affects everything. It's kind of this holographic view, mm-hmm. which got me much more into the Ken Wilber integral consciousness side of things. So I started sort of cherry picking from a lot of different areas, hermeneutics and integral consciousness and spiral dynamics and Enneagram and blah, blah, blah. And I put together this thing I call the integral Enneagram, which is going to take into account, as you say, for instance, states are going to be pulled, allowed to float up and pulled down depending on survival stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the amount of threat or stress that you're under is going to move your perception lenses in this model downward toward a narrower, smaller way of looking at things that's much more kill or be killed,
Yeah,
live or
there's some
die.
biology that there, because all that information and sensory inputs coming in the gateways of the thalamus, and if we're triggered with fight or flight or perceived threat, it's going right to the amygdala. Is okay. How do I survive?
Precisely,
Yeah, yeah,
precise. So
yeah.
you're not going to see things the same way,
Mhm.
and yet when things are going great, it frees your lenses
Yeah, because the
to,
information gets routed, goes to the
yep,
frontal lobes for reflection,
exactly.
decision. Yeah, yeah.
And now you've got, because it's a funnel cloud,
Mhm.
very narrow at the bottom, very wide at the top. As you ascend, there's lots more room for multiple perspectives simultaneously to coexist
Yeah, yeah,
without, obliterating one another like matter and antimatter.
yeah.
And so this opposing things are not necessarily opposing. We could either look at each other and say we're opposing each other, or we could go back to back and have a 360-degree view of the world.
Right. Yeah. And recognize that it's all in the same continuum.
Yeah.
One of the simple metaphors that I like to is, yeah, we have duality. We tend to have these characterizations of things that are good or bad, or these polarizations or opposites. Well, a good way to perceive that's not completely true. Nothing's that black and white. Temperature, hot and cold. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
well, what's hot and what's cold? Contextual. Somebody in Alaska is going to consider something completely different as being hot or cold. And then more importantly, no matter where we are, when does hot become cold and cold become hot? It's basically all the same experience or reality. It's just where on the continuum we are. And as you mentioned, we can pull ourselves a little closer together. So, you know, hot or cold is now warm or cool.
And they also inhabit each other
Yeah,
in the yin and the yang. There's a little bit of yang in the yin and a
yeah,
little bit of yin and the
yeah,
yang.
yeah, yeah.
But and
There are
so
there are only half truths. Any truth,
exactly,
there's a little bit of its opposite. To use that yin and yang
yeah,
metaphor.
because if you touch something cold enough, it
Mhm.
will burn you,
Yeah, yeah. You'll
right?
blister skin just like you would put in
Exactly,
a
and
hot burner. Yeah,
exactly, and something can be so hot it fools your nervous system into thinking it's cold.
yeah,
You can have it can cross wire because it overloads the signal
right.
to the degree that you get a false signal.
Yeah. So back to the for people that may not be familiar with the Enneagram, it's kind of a typing model to some degree, like Myers-Briggs. My understanding is that you've got these numbers that are assigned if you got certain, behavioral traits
Well,
or
it
whatever.
actually it's more logical than
Yeah.
that. If you let's say we're sitting around a circle by the beach,
Uh-huh.
okay, and each of us is just it's just like a clock face. So if I'm sitting at 6 o'clock and I'm facing the ocean, pretty much all I see is ocean. If you're at 12 o'clock and you're looking at the sand dunes behind me and no water, so your perspective and my perspective seem to be completely different, like what the world is about. But what the Enneagram allows us to do is to go, wait a second, the reason I'm seeing things this way is because I am sitting here.
Yeah.
How,
Yeah.
if
This
I
is
were to
my
get up,
point of view. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not fixed. And that's the
Right.
most important
Yeah.
part
So
because
if I
I
move
can,
somewhere else, I'm going to demonstrate.
bullseye.
Yeah.
Yes, I can come over and sit down next to you and go, gosh, Keith, you're absolutely right. Sand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But I've seen it kind of misused, in my opinion, because
yes,
I hear people saying, well, they're a 5, they're a 7, they're a 2. And this is why they're behaving that way, everything else. And anytime you label anything, you diminish it.
absolutely. 100%. 100%. It's just like when people label themselves. I do
Mhm.
this all the time with them. People label themselves, their identity as a role when the role is an interchangeable one. and their identity is unique. You are not a role. Like you're way more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the model, the way that I came up with the model, rather than you're a 5 or a 7, there are 9 levels of altitude, moving from absolute kill or be killed, I me mine, narcissism, almost animal level, ascending up through ultraviolet Buddha mind. Okay,
so similar to Hawking's models of consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah, the
Yes.
low end is your survival based, or the extreme case of that is evil and
The dark,
doing harm, versus the other end,
yeah,
Mother Teresa's of the world, where there's love and compassion and
exactly. And so having those 9 levels and having and looking at the original Enneagram did not say you were this type with a wing, and like you would turn into this other person if you were stressed, and you would turn into this other person if you were secure. Well, I don't know a real live breathing human being, Keith, who is one thing ever. So that immediately just pushed me away. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. I could be completely confident about myself, like in my own skin. I could be completely stressed about something going on at work simultaneously. So how do I have a model that allows for the stress and the security to live together at the same time? And so what I do is I take all 5 voices. When Gurdjieff wrote about this, his wording, and I'm paraphrasing, when all 5 voices are in harmonic correspondence, you are the finished type of man, meaning that you can be any one, any grouping, or all at any time. That opens up all of these possibilities. Well, that was the original 1897, wow, this is amazing stuff, idea. And they completely obliterated the 5 voices.
Yeah.
So if you take 5 voices that can independently move through 9 levels, you come up with 5 to the 5th to the 9th power. You're talking roughly 2 million variables per person, which means now, and those variables are moving. So I can get so accurate with this that it's scary. And basically, I've had situations where, actually about a year or so ago, before COVID, when we could sit down in a coffee shop, I met with a guy who was going through hell, and his wife was going to leave him, and he was feeling literally suicidal. And he asked me if we could go have coffee. Yep, let's go talk. Within about 15 minutes or so, he is crying. And I'm like, whoa, dude, what's going on here? And he's like, how do you know me better than my wife of 20 years? And basically, it's something that you're probably pretty familiar with in your work, which is content can be a lot of noise.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So that's basically what I do with a human being is I say content, forget it. Let's look at the process for arriving at that content. Because that's where the work is. That's what we can alter.
It's so a close parallel is in NLP. You focus on the behavior rather than trying to label or change or everything, because everybody's doing the best they can with the awareness or resources that they're aware of, and the behavior may make perfectly good sense.
Absolutely.
In their context, and also what their understanding and awareness is.
I came up with a term for the context that you're talking about. I call it a framework of understanding.
Yeah, that's a very accurate way to articulate it. Yeah.
I actually a talk I did the other night, I was talking about actually 5 simple rules for extraordinary relationships, because it's really very simple when you get right down to it. And one of them was about this understanding this framework of understanding. My example is way obvious: a fish and a bird. And you have the bird looking down at the fish thinking, what the hell is wrong with him? Like, why doesn't he just fly? It's the simplest thing in the world. Like, it's what I would do. And the fish is looking up at the bird going, oh my God, how does he breathe up there? How does he swim? So there's no way, until we can empty our cup of all of our preconceived stuff, our judgments, and our framework of understanding, that yes, this is how I organize and understand the world. But I can't put that on you. I've got to give you a blank piece of paper, or I'm going to miss a lot.
And realize those perception is understanding the framework that we're operating from is primarily unconscious. We've picked it up from our families of origin, from observing,
Sure.
parental interactions, sibling interactions, what was taught to us, the paradigms of education and culture and everything. And once those are kind of mastered, they become unconscious, because we don't have to think about them. It's just the way our biology works. And then more importantly, most of us have picked that up by osmosis, because from age 0 to age 7, roughly, the rational thinking centers, the disciplinary centers, and frontal lobes aren't even online yet, and they just start to develop there, and they don't fully mature till age 25. And then we're all just sort of on autopilot with a lot of things. There's also an area of the brain called the reticular axis system. That's the brain's bouncer that filters out things that is in opposition to some strongly held belief system. So that even further filters our perceptions and limits our ability to maybe see how others are seeing things differently. Or how we do, as you mentioned, very dynamically, contextually, based on our own state, what we're experiencing at work versus at home, and all the, containers that we move around in.
Well, the biggies that are really kind of easy to grab quickly, which allow us to get into the other person's world a little bit faster. Because a lot of what we need to be able to do, first of all, is stop trying to grab people and pull them into our world. It's much easier. We're the practitioners. It's our job. We need to enter their world. And so to be able to see that if somebody is coming from a sense of righteousness, right, wrong, the way things ought to be and whatnot,
which we see a lot these days.
Absolutely.
Very public and in social media and everything else.
And others are motivated primarily by safety, security, making sure that, things don't go wrong. You're going to have a chasm there. There was a great line by this will give you, wrap it all up in one little package. A character on Downton Abbey, the Countess, played by Maggie Smith, plays a perfect Victorian 1, as the Enneagram would say. Okay, it's all about doing things the way they're supposed to be done.
Proper, and there's a hierarchy, right. And
exactly. So there was a place where somebody was explaining how logical this other course of action would be. It's just, this is so much more logical. And she was fighting it. And at one point she said, if it is between principle and logic, I will choose principle every time. It's like, perfect. That is exactly, that tells you exact. And that's where they're going to come from. And the third triad, the heart triad, is going to all be about, who am I in this world? What's my place? How do I fit? What do I do? So somebody whose framework of understanding organizes the world around what's my place in the world, versus a person who looks at the world as I must evaluate it and decides what's right and wrong, versus somebody who looks at the world for what's dangerous. Those are incredibly different people.
Yeah.
And when they start talking, if they're talking from their perspective, there's very often going to be one of these guys happening.
Yeah. It's kind of like the contrast that Ned Herman pointed out when he came up with his whole brain learning, or a whole brain model, because he had the same observation is, first of all, how could he be dumb and smart in two different areas? Because he flunked out of physics or something like that, but excelled at geometry, and saw these mismatches in organizational structures of doctors and nurses. Nurses are more right brain and right brain limbic, so they're going to be empathic, emotional, caretaking. Where the surgeons were left cerebral, they're very analytical and about the precision of surgery and everything else. And that clash that you mentioned earlier often existed in organization and how you perceive things, and having a tool to be able to open up our perceptions a little bit and say, they're not doing this just to piss us off, or they're total jerks or whatever. They're just seeing things differently. They communicate differently. So to circle back to the communication is how do the average person or lay person use some of the tools that you talked about to better facilitate their communication? How do you help them through that?
That's a brilliant question. Beautiful. Here's a hardcore real life example. Had a manager who was there's a right way and a wrong way mindset. And she apparently had been telling her assistant manager, I need you to do it like that, this process, a certain procedure. Didn't happen. Many times. Finally, she calls me up. She said, I am ready to kill this woman. Can you come in here and figure out why she won't do it? So I go and I interview the woman, and what I discover is she is very much of the heart triad mindset. And very much like in my research, by the way, almost every nurse I ever interviewed is an Enneagrammic 2. So it's an interesting that almost every single one, like 99.9%. So she was of that typology. So what I went back to the boss and I said, okay, when you lay out what you want her to do, you're giving her the data. And there's nothing that's hooking her framework. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to change what you say. We're going to start out with, hey, you know what would be really, really helpful? I mean, this would be so great for me. And our customers will love you. I mean, if they would just flip over you. Now I'm going to tell you the procedure.
Yeah.
Because now I have just given you all the reasons to listen to me in the first place. For you, like just doing it, there was no motivation.
Right. Yeah. It's just dry,
blah, blah, blah.
Unengaged activity. It doesn't have any meaning.
Right.
It doesn't fit those values that are associated with her processing mode that you mentioned.
Whereas if she had given it to my brother, who is an absolute brain type, he would have looked at the procedure, potentially looked for what's wrong with it.
Yeah. And how to improve it. Yeah.
How can I improve this? Go back and say, well, I'll do your procedure, but I really think we ought to do this and this and this.
Yeah. I can shorten the steps down to.
Exactly. So, it comes down to, there's a wonderful book, Marcus Buckingham years ago. What was it called? First Break All the Rules. It's a great business book, a collection of like the best management techniques ever. And one of the things that he talked about was this broken concept of you need to treat everyone the same. It's like, no, you need to treat everyone equally,
but not the
but
same.
not
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
same.
yeah. I love the insight I learned years ago about fairness is so misinterpreted that it's like everybody has to be treated exactly the same. No, they just have to get their needs met. It's just like if you're sharing a candy bar with somebody that's that age group, 6 or 7, they're going to be very focused. Well, it's not fair that the pieces weren't exactly the same. Same concept. So when you're providing, some sort of resource in a work environment or whatever, somebody that has special needs or physical difference in ability, what they need to be provided to get their job done may not be the same as somebody else. And fairness is when people get exactly what they need. It's not
Yeah.
about equal delivery of whatever you're providing. Yeah.
Yeah. Opportunity. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like the same opportunities,
Yeah.
but it's up to them. And we absolutely cannot treat people the same because they're not the same, and you're not going to get the most at. The whole point is to optimize.
Right.
And if you're going to optimize, you're going to be looking at things like, well, if the back tires are bigger than the front tires and it's a rear driven car, you're going to have more traction, so let's put the bigger tires on the back instead of the front. And people are the same way. I was running a retail outlet, gosh, like 25, 30 years ago. And the way that they had it set up, the people that they had peopling the different jobs, there were the wrong people in the wrong jobs everywhere.
Yeah. Because people tend to hire and place people based on kind of attributes. Well, you're an accountant, you got certain skills that are basically attributes rather than value based. I love John DeMartini's insights on here. So, because you're better served if you put somebody into a bookkeeper or accounting position. They may not have all the skills that are measurable in our myth of objectivity. That you'd rather have somebody that when their feet hit the floor, that's what they couldn't not do, is they had a passion for bookkeeping or accounting, and that's what drove them every day they lived for. And you're going to get far better success and productivity out of that than somebody that's just going through the mechanics of it. Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
There's job the people versus peopling the jobs.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times it's just a matter of, we need to fill this position, so we put this person in that.
Yeah, it's your cogs in a wheel. It's an industrial
interchangeable
paradigm, or almost manufacturing paradigm. That this is the process and the steps, and we just need somebody to be the cog in the mechanism, so to speak.
That's really astute observation, Keith, because this concept of the industrial revolution,
that permeates us as all kinds of levels. Because the whole hierarchy of management actually dates back to the 1800s when they're building the railroads. They didn't have the money to have duplex tracks, so to speak, one going west, one going east, so they had to share the track. So they had to come up with a management model top down that directed traffic of who was going west when at what time frame, back the other way at another time frame, and one person had to be in command to do that. So that top down model and management model comes from the railroads in the 1800s. Doesn't mean it's the best solution for every enterprise.
Absolutely. And look at performance management and performance evaluations. They're completely rooted in assembly line mentality, because what they're measuring is input, not output.
Right.
How much time are you sitting at your desk? How many times have you pulled the lever?
Right. Yeah.
And so what they're not taking into account is that we're in a time now where staring out the window for an hour
It's
And
actually good for the brain.
I was going to say, and coming up with a way where you can pull the crank once,
Yeah.
and it makes 100 widgets.
Yeah.
Rather than having to pull it 100 times.
So you've got some reflection time, incubate, just time to figure out how to make the lever and the whole process more efficient for example.
It jokingly in my book, Kind Ambition, I had a line. I said, do you really think that sails were invented while being whipped to pull the oars harder?
Yeah. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
You've got to create an environment where creativity can flourish. If creativity is something that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So it's
and
really
that certainly allows you to achieve better success, have more happy, fulfilled people, and so forth. As individuals, what insights can you offer related, whether it's based on simple Enneagram insights or otherwise that would help open up and foster communication in those areas of their lives that we mentioned in your introduction?
Well, I think that some self-reflection, there's never enough. So that's always the place to start, is going, I have an exercise I give people. I call it the 3-year-old exercise. Mm-hmm. It's called 9 Whys to the Truth, which of course sounds a lot funnier if you're doing an Australian accent. 9 Whys to the Truth. No, not wise, wise. But
and not confused with 9 wives.
Exactly. But if you listen to a little kid when they're like, why? And you answer, why? And you answer. And what ends up happening, if you get to 9 whys, you invariably uncover a truth that you never would have seen before. Yeah. It's really cool.
It's very, very close parallel to one of my favorite questions in coaching is, how is that a problem? Yeah. And if you keep, and whatever the answer is, how is that a problem? You iterate it like 9 times, or whys or hows, either one.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the why is a major big deal. It's kind of like Simon Sinek has been doing a lot of stuff around this too, that what companies get out of order is that I've got this really cool widget. Let's figure out how to get people to buy it. Rather than, wait a second, let's start with a why.
Right. Yeah. Apple figured that out because they were late to the game with MP3 players. Everybody else is pitching, well, we get so many megabytes and blah, 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 all the tech specs. And they come out like 10,000 songs in your pocket.
Yeah.
That's the why.
So exactly, like, why would you want to do all that work? How about we make it easier? Yeah. And so if it's solving a problem, it's great. There's so that going to the why immediately drives you to your core values
and beliefs.
Yeah. And your values will then get to your beliefs, because your beliefs are going to be based on a combination of, let's take some values, put them in the bowl. Now let's take some experiences and put them in the bowl. Now let's take some narratives from parents.
Teachers, it's all this noise that gets mixed up in that.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody accused me of, oh, well, you believe this and you believe that. And I said, actually, the more I think about it, the less I think I actually believe anything. I either know something or I don't know something.
One of my favorite insights from a yogi that follows is what we believe doesn't matter. Because what's more important is what we know. And the only thing we know for sure is what we experience, because even knowledge that's passed down through school education over there is passed down. We're accepting it on faith that somebody else had that experience or gathered that knowledge. But the only thing we know for sure is what we have directly experienced.
Absolutely. And experienced through our filters. So once again, but this aspect of where the language will come in, when you get to your core values, and you're going to embody them and be them, your language starts to shift immediately. So one of the ways things that will happen is, for instance, almost an NLP kind of thing. If you were to say to yourself, can I do this? Your brain says, okay, let's look at that problem and solve that problem. Can I? Well, I don't know. This could, and it works on that problem.
Mhm.
If we change it to the assumptive close, as they would say in sales, how am I going to solve this problem?
Yeah, that's where I'm going to say that if you look at the how can I do this? Yeah,
You
it opens up possibility.
Yeah, now your brain is set on a course,
right,
to solve the problem,
yeah,
rather than set on a course
and has
to
an intention.
self-evaluate.
I have the intention of finding out.
Yeah, and you're not going to solve a problem by self-evaluating,
Yeah.
which is the can I. And it's going to take you down a completely different road. It's like, I'm going south and I want to go to Alaska. What am I doing?
Yeah, because the usual answer for that is I can't.
Yeah, yeah. Or if only, one of my other favorites. If only is it's a Star Trek transporter. If only, what's this? Now we're in this other world. But yeah, the little twists like that. The language thing again. One of the biggies is changing when you're trying to get people to do something. This is a big one with management and whatnot. Rather than decree,
or with your children,
or your girlfriend, or your boyfriend, or your wife, or your husband,
whatever the relationship is.
Good call. Good call. Decrees will always start with a pushback. They will immediately get pushback. There's some little thing back in the hippocampus going, go clean your room,
right.
Do your homework, take out the trash. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
So instead of decrees, if you can throw out questions that are like what ifs. Well, what if you guys had more say in what to do around here? What would that be like? Rather than we're going to implement a new process where you guys have more to say, and everybody's going, yeah, sure, and you'll never believe us. But it's like, what would it be like if that happened? Okay, well, if we did that, what would you need to see to prove that we're really doing it for evidence? Because we want you to know we're not full of it.
Yeah.
Like, boom, now you've got engagement like gangbusters. And that's really the deal, is if we can get the engagement happening, we don't have to do it by ourselves, and we don't have to push so hard.
Yeah. I like it. So where can people find you on the internet to learn more about your approach to communication and the Enneagram tools that you're leveraging?
Well, there's two websites for sure. One of them is my optimized-results.com, which one of the things I saw about your thing was optimized. I'm like, oh, see, we are on the same. And the other is just my name, IANBLEI.com.
Okay.
And
I noticed you quickly referenced a book. What publications do you have for people to explore?
This is the only one that's actually out so far.
Okay.
I
like the title "Kind Ambition" because often ambition is associated with ruthlessness, and
that's the whole point of the book, my friend. What this whole book is 50 quick little ideas. There's a place in California in San Francisco called the Exploratorium. It's a science museum.
I've been there.
Okay. It inspired me because every experiment says to do and notice. And I thought, why don't I write a book that takes that idea and gives you an idea and here to do and notice.
Experience and observe. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's 50 chapters, 50 like no longer than 3 pages. So we can go in the bathroom. For
reading, not for other people.
Yeah, exactly. It's not big enough. But it's basically what I determined in all my years of doing business processing and organizational development, all that stuff, was that chapter 50 is flipping over the cards. Compassion is actually pragmatic. And it's a mind blower. It's like, guess what? You will actually make far more profitability more sustainably with a compassionate approach than ever by, kill or be killed.
Yeah, it's kind of equivalent of, I think, Brian Hall back in the 80s. And my wife practiced that as a principal when she was the director of and of a childcare center and management, and sort of heart-centered leadership. It would be a similar characterization, I guess.
Yeah. It's basically a lot of the stuff that Tony Hsieh did when he took over Zappos is very, very similar kind of thing, where it was much more about, why are we being so complicated with this stuff? What we really want to do is deliver happiness. Like, that makes it so easy.
And each person's got their own perception and definition of happiness.
Exactly.
So one model's not going to work for everything. Yeah.
Exactly. And you don't have to train, because basically, if your job is to deliver happiness, then it's going to be about the interchange that you have with the person, the exchange that you have with the person, and figuring out how to do that.
What's going to motivate them to get the outcomes that you want?
You want, how can I make you happy? So pretty easy thing to do. And so optimize results and Ian Bly, and of course I'm on all the dang social media things. Pretty easy to find there.
Is your book available on those sites or Amazon? Where can people find it?
It's available on Amazon, but I prefer.
Yeah, because then you get a little bit bigger cut of the revenue.
Well, they make me pay for shipping.
Right.
Plus, if you buy it directly from me, I will autograph and sign it to you.
There you go. There's motivation enough.
There you go. It's your own personalized copy. But definitely this. There was a book I wanted to mention to you that I thought you would adore. It's are you familiar with Terry Winograd or Fernando Flores?
No, not either one.
Yeah. It's called Understanding Computers and Cognition, and it's a whole foundation of design between an AI engineer, coding engineer, and a linguist.
Which kind of makes sense, because you're trying to get those algorithms to kind of learn the decision-making and processes that are much more organic and done by the human brain.
Exactly. So to be able to think, computers do not think very much like us at all.
Oh, no, they're very fast sequential processors, period.
Yeah. But there is...
And it's all based on yes-no decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just zig, 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 zig. Yeah. Whereas we kind of go, bang.
Yeah, it's much more synergetic, holistic, and influenced by other areas of our brain processing, emotions, and
exactly.
The whole scheme.
And a lot of what works out for guys in coaching is a lot of exercise that increases corpus callosum wiring, because then you've got way more left-right communication going on.
Right. And you're going to have a more holistic approach and perspective.
Exactly. It's going to, so you can look at, rather than emotional data being line noise as far as your decision making goes, it's not line noise.
No, it's the fundamental of what we make decisions on. We just rationalize it after those emotional centers have made the decision.
Exactly. Yeah. So just suppressing it is not making a better decision.
Yet that's what our culture, kind of imposes on us, especially for males, is to ignore your feelings.
Yeah, big boys don't cry. Right.
Well, it's been a delight exploring the topics of better communication, and at least for me, I enjoyed learning a little bit more about the Enneagram, and then more importantly, the insights that you have or developed over the years of expanding the utility of that kind of model. It just seems much more intuitive and make a lot more sense than what I've experienced from a lot of practitioners of the labeling and typing. Well, that's they're doing that just because they're 5 or 2 or 7 or whatever. And as I mentioned, those any kind of labeling diminishes who we are, and we have far more potential as human beings when we make those brain shifts that allow us to explore greater success, health, wellness, and fulfillment, and whatever we want as outcomes in life.
For instance, if hypothetically somebody were to say, "Oh, Keith, I think you're a 5," where I would go with that.
I have somebody in my life that constantly says that, even though I've never volunteered to be typed.
Okay, so I can sort of grok a little bit of it, but here's where you're not just a 5 at all, because 5 has an incredibly emotionally authentic, artistic, aesthetic piece to it that is feeding in to your perception. Mm-hmm. Also has an extremely pragmatic engineering, fix what's broken, don't let it go wrong lens as a part of it. Yeah. Also has a very Leonardo da Vinci brainstorming, interested in everything. Oh, this is cool too. Give me more experience lens. Also has let's get this thing done. If everybody else is too stupid to do it, I'll do it myself because I can do it. You take all of those perspectives and you mix them together, you get a very interesting, very intricate individual.
Yeah. And unfortunately, most social containers, especially workplaces and relationships, aren't that open to see all those influences. Yeah. So, well, it's been a delight talking with you. I hope what we've kind of explored and shared together is of benefit to our audience. Again, you can find Ian on the locations that he mentioned on the internet. I'll have them in the show podcast notes, as well as a link to where you can find his book on his website. So hope you'll join us again in a couple of weeks. We've had a little bit of a summer reprieve. Took a little time off from the podcast. So we're back in our routine going forward. So join us in a couple of weeks so you can explore and experience your own brain shifts.